I'm Roger Blonder, and I am the Director of Media Arts.
I'm Tony Soltis. I teach English. We did a class together with Honors English 11, Integrated Media Arts, and Judaic Studies.
I'm Devin Villarreal. I'm a teacher and chair of the Jewish Studies Department and taught this integrated class with media arts that also had a multi-week unit that integrated with the English class, looking at the common threads between themes of transcendentalism and Jewish literature.
From my standpoint, if I'm teaching a media arts class that is not connected to anything else, they come in and what we have to draw from is social media and YouTube and silly videos and you know, there's just, this is where they go. Like, we know naturally they're just clicking on these things that are funny and they're sharing this stuff. And so I'm at a tremendous loss because they're not in my class to write. They're not in my class to think about Judaic studies. You know, and I could take time to do that, but when for 7 other periods of the day, they're asked to show up to that modality of thinking where they have to be on in history and English and Judaic studies and math and science and you know, Hebrew and psychology, whatever the class, I can't get anywhere. But when I'm able to connect with you guys, so they're able to go and they're held accountable, and it's beyond held accountable. They're stimulated by where you take them.
And at the heart of transcendentalism is this idea that there's a truth that we all sense, a deeper truth that goes beyond our senses, that the information our senses take in is part of the picture of reality, but it's not all of the reality. And transcendentalism at heart is about transcending the characteristics of life to get to the real character of life, what's really revealed about humanity. And if you only rely on your senses, it's easy to become cynical, it's easy to believe what apparently are differences between us, you know, between men and women, or nationalities, or wealthy and poor people. It's easy to believe those things because our senses make us believe they tend to be true. But that's really only looking at life on a very superficial level. And from what my understanding of the Jewish text is that there's a deeper truth that people can avail themselves to if they're willing to go deeper than their senses. There's no such thing as a supernatural experience with God that makes sense to the senses. You know, you can't talk to a burning bush. You know, you really can't do that. On a sensible level, it makes no sense at all. But there's a truth, nevertheless, being revealed there if you're open to understanding it. And it doesn't come from your senses. It comes from that deeper sense of I. When I introduce transcendentalism, I always do this thing with my students. I say, okay, relax for a second, put both feet on the floor, take a breath, just try to be quiet for a second, and say to yourself, don't do it yet, but when I tell you to do this, you're going to say this line: I wonder what my next thought will be. Ready? Relax, take a breath, say the line to yourself. And inevitably, almost everybody has a second or two where there's no thought. There's no thought. Because in asking yourself that question, you've acknowledged there's a deeper sense of self that views the questions that come up in your head. That the things in your head are only part of the reality of life. That there's a deeper sense of truth that we all know, but we don't always acknowledge. It's like the old joke about the 2 fish in the water. The 2 fish are swimming, and the old fish comes by and goes, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And the old fish goes by, and the 2 fish turn to each other and go, "What the hell is water?" Because sometimes the most obvious truths are hard to be aware of. The things that the reality we're actually in is sometimes the hardest thing to be cognizant of. And that's what transcendentalism tries to do it at the heart. The videos the students end up making are based on writings that are inspired by those same types of thinking that we get from Emerson, Thoreau, and what's her name, Margaret Fuller. I always forget her. Many people do. But those kinds of ideas that there's a deeper truth, a sensibility below the senses, you know, the roots.
When I consider transcendentalism, there's a lot of touch points with Jewish texts, but for me it felt most obvious in the prophetic tradition. And so we were looking at both Hosea and Isaiah, who had very different approaches to sort of shaking up what people accept as reality, right? Both of them were trying to deal with injustice, right? And those superficial differences between nations, between social classes, between levels of wealth, and so on. And what you had is a division between sort of the contemplative approach to changing that, which I think was popular amongst the transcendentalists. I'm not an expert in transcendentalism, but there's this notion of sort of being alone and being in nature, sort of moves past those things. And you find a similar contemplative approach in somebody like Hosea, right, who's about doing tshuva, right, doing repentance, and it's about sort of looking inward and repairing that fundamental relationship between a person and the source of all being, and that somehow by doing that, right, and creating that small sphere of influence around yourself, right, that you could slowly change things.
I'm the beneficiary of that because I get to take these enlightened people, show them how to use tools, teach them how to use tools, give them time and space, create an atmosphere of creativity, and then they're able to do something of meaning. And for me, like, I always go back to this philosophy that I have of the tree. You can laugh if you need to, but the tree analogy, like, and look, and I'm the way that I'm seeing it is as a model of interdisciplinary education. To say if the text teacher understands that their function is to take them and to drink from the roots, and the academic teacher is to say, let's go explore ideas in the light, and let's connect that idea in literature to an idea in the roots, and then let's find a way to turn that into a fruit on the tree. So when that energy flow gets moving between the kid reaching for the light and reaching for the light with you, going down into the roots with Devin, then I'm saying let's take that energy flow and turn it into a blossom or a fruit. And that's what these finished products are. Ultimately, they need to shift into a different modality of existence. They need, in my space, in this media lab, in an art class, in a dance class, in a theater class, they need to become a different kind of person. The person that they're yearning to be. They need to be playful and they need to enjoy, but they need to have substance. I always talk about like meaningful media.
And I think that's what the students try to write. If you look at look at the words in their videos, they all kind of talk about being oblivious to really obvious truths and belief in material, superficial things rather than deeper truths. And then those were expressed in video form, which made them more palpable, more enjoyable to listen to, more fun to hear those messages, because we often hear those messages, but it's not the message, it's the story that makes this message, digestible. And so by putting it into the thing with the writing, that what Sam did or David, it takes those basic ideas and just makes us digest them a little bit differently.
So they tend to think, oh, well, this is the class I can be playful in, this is the class where I do writing, this is the class where I do mathematics. And, the real value for me of integration is learning how to integrate yourself as a person. You have these dimensions of yourself, they're always available, and you can call upon them as they are good tools for the task, to get back to Tony's point, to recognize that these are all good tools for the task, but they're in service of a task. So as much as we're aware of our full toolkit and are encouraged to develop it in as many different environments as possible, that's a tremendous service to the students, and one that I think that we largely, including myself, fail at. So I think that's the power of the integrated model, is to recognize that, no, it's not this is your 50 minutes because Blonder is nice, to mess around. It's like, no, actually, what I just did in English, what I just did in math, what I just did in science, all I was doing and all of my modality there actually has a role here if I am open to considering myself as a complete person, including the playfulness. I think that if we can just at least, through the integrated components, just be able to show that this was more than just an academic exercise, it was more than just having to fulfill a requirement, that through the integration there was something more organic, something more holistic, and something ultimately more enduring about it. I think that that is as grandiose as it needs to be. And by doing this, it's not that it's going to change the world necessarily, right? But you know what? It actually is, for a population of students, just a better way of education.